The Holy Gospel is written in the 10th chapter of St. Luke, beginning at the 25th verse. Just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? Do you read there?" "What do you read there?" He answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and your strength and all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You've given the right answer. Do this, and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to the inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend." Which of these do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? He answered, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said, "Go and do likewise." Here ends the gospel for the day. Please be seated. The Good Samaritan story is probably, without question, one of the most familiar parables and teachings of Jesus in the entire New Testament. But if you heard it many, many times, you've probably heard the same basic outline of the sermon done so many times that it's almost like second nature. You could probably preach the sermon yourself this morning. We could concentrate on the 2 people who passed on the other side. One was a priest or a rabbi. The other was a Levite, a high-ranking person within the church. And they passed by on the other side, didn't care. And we could talk about hypocrisy and how people who are high members of the church, important people, sometimes don't have much care and concern. We could talk about that. But that wouldn't do you much good, would it? Or we could refer to a number of stories of strangers who help people. About 4 years ago, the Reader's Digest did an article, 24 stories about strangers who help people. Nice, heartwarming stories. One was a woman by the name of Mrs. Lang, who was in the grocery store and had charged or was going to buy a number of groceries, and when she got the bill, it was $12 more than she had on herself. And so she started to take groceries out of the bag, and the person behind her stopped her and said, No, let me take care of you. I'm going to pay for it. Mrs. Lang said, I turned to him and I said, well, don't put yourself to the trouble. It's not your fault that I'm short of cash. And he said, please take it. And she said, I argued with him, and finally he told me this. Here's why I'm paying for it. My mother's in the hospital, and she's very sick. And every day I bring her flowers. And my mother said, there's no reason to bring me flowers every day. They're a lot of money. But I'll tell you what. You take the amount of money that you're going to pay for these flowers and you spend it on somebody that has need for it today. Said that's what my mother taught me, to care. and to do things for others. In her final moments of her life, this is what she was saying: don't pour a lot of stuff on me that doesn't make any sense to me, won't do me any benefit. I know you care, I know you love me. You love me by helping others today. And tell me what you did. Mrs. Lang said she was deeply touched. And this was a meaningful story, and it changed her attitude toward helping strangers out. We could tell all kinds of touching stories, and you might have one of your own, of somebody who came to you and thanked you for your care, for your concern, for sticking with them, for giving words of confidence, supporting them in times of trouble. But I don't know if that would do any good this morning either. I'm going to take a different assault on this morning, this text. I'm going to talk about why we don't sometimes help people out. Why we make excuses for it. But the reality is most of these excuses have a great deal of validity. They are sometimes reasons for questioning whether you should do something or not. How's that? We haven't attacked the text that way. I'm sure none of us read this text or hear this text without feeling some guilt. Because every day we are assaulted by ways that we can help other people. It not only comes from the church, it comes from every segment of society. From political sources, from business sources, from whatever. We have opportunities every day to help. Sometimes we respond by saying, I just can't give to everything. Now, I watched television before I left, the day before I left, and I wondered how many ads dealt with helping out others on television. Television ads that are 30 seconds to a full minute, which would cost millions to a corporation. I saw an ad of children in Africa who were starving. Showed pictures of children just in the process of dying because they didn't have enough food or because they had unclean water or whatever the reason was. And it really tugs at the heartstrings. For only $21 a month, you can feed 6, 7 children for a month. Certainly a good cause. Saw another ad about Jewish people from the Holocaust who are living in absolute poverty, and they too are starving to death. And they showed pictures of a number of older people who are barely getting by. For just $21 a month, you can give them food for a month. Danny Thomas's hospital, St. Jude. We know that is a good cause. We have a member here that has a grandchild in that hospital. We know it's important. They suggest you give $21 a day because Danny Thomas said he couldn't do it all alone. See pictures, another one of an advertisement for dogs and cats that are starving. And it says, contribute this much a month and you will save these animals. And there are a lot of people who are much more involved in caring for animals than they are about humans. It's a good ad, and it's not a bad cause. We go now to almost any fast food place or grocery store, and if they total up your bill, they say, would you like me to add something for a charity? HEB has 3 different levels of giving that you can do for food for those who need it. I think it's Walmart or one of the other stores that says, well, can we round your amount up to the closest, highest dollar and give that to charity? And there's a point where we start saying, every place that I go, they want something from me. If you go down to the street in Austin, almost every corner has somebody asking for charity. And they try to make you feel guilty doing it because they usually have a sign that says, "Thank God for whatever you give me," or "God bless you." And then the ministerium comes and says, "We'll contribute our cause because we're giving food to the food pantries." All good causes. But sometimes we get to the point where we said we have enough. Every place. Can we give too much? Well, I suppose we could. But sometimes in the process of all this, we become so frozen to the whole thing that we kind of disregard it all and say, "I'm not going to help anybody." And then we have those that don't seem to help themselves even though we try. On my trip, I was dealt with a couple who were helping a good friend of those who was going through his problems with alcoholism. He'd been to 4 treatment centers, and he had just been admitted to the 5th. And the cost was $73,000 a month to a place in Malibu. And all these times they tried to help him, and he still comes out of remission and goes into the habit again. And she said, "I'm tired of doing it. I'm tired of supporting him. What should I do?" And we talked a long time, almost 4 hours, on trying to alleviate her guilt and get her to a place where she felt good about pulling back a little bit so she didn't take all of her time for somebody that she couldn't do much with. We have employers that said, "I try to help, but people don't work. They don't want to do the job. I can't find people who will do common tasks. I'm tired of helping out." Then we have compassion burnout. Have you ever heard of that? People who become involved in the helping professions, where they're psychologists, sociologists, doctors, nurses, whatever, say, "I spend so much time giving myself away," and they break down themselves. It happens a lot. I just saw a statistic last week that said 1,500 ministers are leaving the ministry every month. And the basic cause is, they said, "I just get worn out trying to help too much." There is such a thing as compassion burnout. Some people are beyond our help. Sometimes another reason we give is because we're bleeding ourselves. We've gotten to the point where we have to concentrate on ourselves. We have so many difficulties and problems in our own life and our own families, we just don't have any more to give. I need to be the recipient. All of these have some legitimacy in the complaints that are lodged against helping. And sometimes we feel like the Levite or the priest who just wants to walk on the other side and let the bleeding continue. I think the text does not tell you that you should feel guilt and work to the point where you destroy yourself or your family in trying to help others. You just can't save the world. However, the text says that there are some things that will make your life more beneficial in the lives of others. The first thing it says is be a little sensitive. The reality is that all people are your neighbors, and every one of them is bleeding in some way. I know of no person that goes through this world without problems, difficulties, sometimes to the point where they don't think they can bear it. Be alert. Be willing to listen. Be a little sensitive. And open your eyes. Second thing I said is be realistic about what you can and can't do. There are some people in situations that can't be helped by you. And one of the things you need to do is have a ready access of a number of people that deal with things that are beyond your control. Sometimes being the most help to people is simply giving them the names and places and phone numbers of other people who deal with their particular hardship, who really can do the job. A third thing I think is, and I quote it because I do it a lot, you need a laughing place. Remember the story of Bear Rabbit? Bear Rabbit was always pursued. He was always in trouble for one thing or another. But he had a place in the briar patch where he could go because the wolf or the fox couldn't catch him there. He sit in the middle of the briar patch and he was safe. And he forgot about the problems. And he just had a place of sanctuary. That's what I use as my justification for the golf course. That's my laughing place. That's where I forget about everything else and worry about my score. You need a laughing place. You need a place of your own refuge where you can take care of yourself. Because, as the airlines say, you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of anybody else. And the fourth, but I think is the most important, and really the message of this parable today, is do it for the right reasons. If you try to help people because you really need to help them, it's for your own satisfaction that you really feel important because you're helping, you're going to be disappointed. Because some people aren't going to appreciate your help. Sometimes the thank yous don't come. And sometimes there's no change no matter what you do. And you have to back off and just be concerned about yourself. But the motive has to be, God loved me and God cared for me, and when I'm bleeding, He cares for me and comes to me in very special ways. And I will respond to other people simply because I care. Because it's God's will that I care. And if I don't make a change, if I don't wind up helping the person, sometimes maybe even doing them some harm, I got to say, I'll be forgiven. It's okay, because I'm trying to do what God taught me to do, to be a little sensitive and a little caring. Good Samaritan. Powerful story. But it's just not about niceties. It's about the real world. And the fact that people are bleeding and need help, and sometimes we are. We receive God's help, and because we receive God's grace and glory, we return it to other people, no matter what. Amen.